Hey there everyone, welcome back to the channel. So it is that time of the year again, time for all the crop tour data to come out. Fix my mic, it's a little messed up. Anyway, so last week was the Pro Farmer Crop Tour. That's where they go around and just check out the corn and beans throughout the country and come up with yield estimates for each state, each major corn and soybean producing state, and the country as a whole. And I don't know those exact numbers, what they came up with, but I thought I would do a kind of Iroquois County, Illinois crop tour. Of course, it's not really the whole Iroquois County. I'm just going to be looking at our farm. I just thought I'd go around and show you guys what our crop's looking like, and I wish I had better news because, as you can see, our corn is burning up. So this corn looks like, I realize we're facing into the sun, but this corn looks like it's getting about mature, and it really isn't. It's just burning up. So you look at this corn and all the husks have turned brown and died already, and that's just because of a lack of rain. We have not gotten a decent rain in at least a month. I'm not exactly sure when the last decent rain was. That strong derecho storm went through and it only gave us about 2/10, and since then we've had a 3/10 rain and a 2/10 rain, and it's just not really enough to get us by. We really need a good soaker inch, 2 inches. I mean, even a slow 3-inch would be okay, but we really need a rain. We needed it a couple weeks ago. The corn, thankfully, is far enough along that I don't think it'll hurt us too bad. We might lose some test weight because of it, but it's pretty much made up its mind what it's going to yield. Beans, on the other hand, they really need a drink. Might be hard to see, but we've got beans over here. This was probably our best looking field of soybeans. I thought they had pretty good potential going through the growing season, and now that we're short on rain, they might fall short a little bit. So I think if we got a rain today or the next couple days, there's still time on them. They're not mature yet. Some of them we're starting to see some sudden death. I don't know if you can see over there, but they're really starting to burn up over in there and in some areas. But we're gonna go around, look at a few fields, pull some ears, do some ear counts, and yeah. Now once you get into this field, this is the same field, I haven't gone anywhere yet, but once you get in here and you start looking, it doesn't look too bad. You look down the rows, nice and clean. It doesn't look like we had a whole lot of disease pressure on this. I'll be honest, I don't know my diseases very well, but we've got a little bit on this leaf. It doesn't look too bad. So I'm not thinking that disease was a real problem in this field, but the lack of water definitely was, because this corn should still be green yet. It should still be growing. I'm assuming it hasn't black layered yet. I haven't pulled an ear, but I haven't found any that's black layered yet. So this corn crop should still be green, should still be growing. It should look like this. I mean, ideally it would be darker green, but it should still be growing. It's not done yet. So we're gonna pull a few ears here. I'll kind of show you how we do some yield checks in corn. It's not really that difficult, but yeah, we're gonna do that. So to do a yield check in corn, we plant corn in 30-inch rows, and somebody smarter than me figured out that 17.5 feet of row is 1/1000th of an acre when you plant in 30-inch rows. So I didn't have a tape measure in my truck. We're gonna do this kind of the cheater way, and I'm just gonna step it off with my boots. My boots are about a foot. I wear a size 12, so we're just gonna step it off and do it that way. I know it won't be super accurate, but it'll be a way I can get our population pretty close. Make a mark here so I know where to start, and we'll just start stepping off. 2, 3, 4. All right, so what you do after you get your measurement stepped off is you count the ears in that 17.5 feet. You don't count the plants, you want to count the ears, because if a stalk doesn't have an ear on it, it's not going to contribute to yield. So you count the ears. All right, 30 plants. So since that's 1/1000th of an acre, that means we have a stand of 30,000 plants per acre. We planted this a little thicker than that. We planted about 32.5, I think, and maybe it's 33.5, but we had some cold growing season. We might have lost some here and there. So what I do is just take some random ears and try not to look at them when you're grabbing them, because you always kind of gravitate towards the big ears. So go along with your hands. When you feel an ear, just grab it. I always pull 3 ears. This one will do. All right, got my 3 ears. I'm gonna get out of this cornfield and we'll go do some analysis on the tailgate. Now there is a way to estimate yield based on how many kernels are on the ear. And I have an app that does the math for me. I've checked it versus the calculation that everyone uses, and it comes out pretty much the same. It's a lot easier to just punch it into that app than it is to actually use the calculator. So that's what I do. Got my 3 ears. We're gonna count them all. So I always try to be conservative when counting kernels. I never count the bottom row and then I stop about there, just to be conservative. If you count all these little ones, they don't actually add up to yield that much. So skip the bottom row, count the kernels in a row and the rows around. So we'll count the rows around first. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 around. Fun fact, corn always has an even number of rows around. Probably didn't know that, now you do. Then you count kernels in a row. Skip the bottom, 1, 2, 31, 16 by 31. Now I'll take my phone, close all my apps, crop calculator. So hopefully you can see this. What you do is we counted 30 plants in that 17.5 feet, so 30,000. Keep that 30. We were 16 around, 31 high, grain yield 163. So that one works out to 163. I'll do the math on these other two, average them, and we'll come up with a yield. Alright, so after doing the math, we came up with an average yield of 164.3 bushels to the acre. This here was 14 around, this one was 18 around. As you can see, they are full right to the tip. So that means we didn't have it planted thick enough, which it could have been just some plants didn't grow because of the cold temps earlier on. But also, being full right to the tip tells me that they had a pretty decent growing season. And up until this dry spell, we did have a pretty decent growing season. We were getting rain when we needed it, and it really helped this corn crop along. But now it's turned off dry. So thankfully, our corn was pretty well filled out before we got to this dry spell. Like I said, we might be losing some test weight now, but this corn's pretty far along. You can see it's dented already. I'm gonna crack this one open. And let's see, milk line. And these are pretty shallow kernels. If we don't get some water, they're gonna be pretty small. That one was the 18 around. These might be bigger. Yeah, these are a little bigger. That milk line is not quite half the way down yet. I'd say it's a third of the way down. Obviously, we're not black layered yet. What that means is when you take a kernel off and you bust the tip, you'll see a layer of black. They call it black layer, and that means that the corn is officially mature. It is not going to put any more weight on or try and grow anymore. It's done. So this corn still has time to put some weight on. We just need some rain. Now I'm going to go over into the beans, and it hasn't rained for a month. I could probably just walk right through this ditch, so hope I don't fall or run into a snake or something. Almost fell. There. that wasn't too bad. So, let's check these beans out. So looking out across these beans, they really don't look too bad. This is our cleanest field of beans. They got some decent height to them. They're about waist high, which doesn't really mean anything on beans. Beans are really weird compared to corn. They do weird stuff. But that is what it is. So anyways, beans are really hard to do yield calculations on just because they are so weird. They put pods on so late in the season if you get the right rains, and counting pods doesn't equate to yield necessarily. So you can't really do a yield check. You can count pods. I know the Pro Farmer Tour, they don't even really say a yield. They just say how many pods in a 3x3 square. And I'm out of breath. I'm really out of shape. But anyways, looking at these beans, they don't look too bad. These did get sprayed with fungicide and a foliar feed. Let's see, probably about a month, 5 weeks ago or so. So they don't really have any disease in them. If you look down here towards the bottom, some of these leaves are getting yellow. That's just because they are way down in the canopy and they're not getting any sunlight. So they're already starting to die off, and the top of the beans are really doing the work here. So I'm gonna pull a plant out. Come on. So it didn't really do what I wanted it to, but roots, I was wanting to show you the nodules for nitrogen, but it kind of ripped them all off when I pulled it out. But soybeans, I mean, it's a healthy plant. I see a lot of 2-bean pods, and I see some 1-bean pods, which is strange. But up at the top here, you can see, I'm trying to do this with one hand, these guys up here, these are a little bit later pods. So these plants did put some yield on pretty late in the season, but I just don't think we're going to have the rain to fill these guys out. I mean, I could be wrong. If we get a rain this weekend with this hurricane coming up, that could really save these beans. But overall, they don't look too bad. Like I said, I can't really do a yield analysis or yield check on them. Wow, there is a lot of 1-bean pods. I count 3, and there's a lot of 2-bean pods. So, I don't know. Early in the season, we had really high hopes for our soybeans. Now, we are starting to second guess them just because of the lack of rain. So, sorry. It'll just be one of those things we won't really know until we get out in them and start to combine them. But if we don't get a rain, I don't have very high hopes for them. But we will move on. All right, we moved on down the road to another field. Pardon this weedy mess. This is actually a little patch of CRP that we just planted this year, and it seems like whenever we or anybody puts CRP in, it's just weeds for the first couple years, and it takes a while for the seed to actually get going. So this is kind of a disaster right now, and I really don't like looking at all that water hemp, so it might get mowed pretty soon. But anyways, we're over at the next field. As you can see, this field looks a lot greener and healthier, but it looks really, really thin. So my guess is this is a spot that kind of needed to be patched in, replanted, but it didn't really get replanted because we had so much to do, we might have missed a spot. But we're gonna go out here, grab some ears, and see what we end up with for yield, and go from there. So I'll be right back. Got the ears. So I will do the calculations real quick and get right back to you. All right. These 3 ears, I counted 32,000 population here once I got past this thin spot where we actually had a normal stand. So that was a little bit better. These came out at 202.3. So a lot better yield. This is some better ground right through here. It's a little heavier, holds onto the nutrients in the water a little better, and usually have some pretty good corn. The problem with this farm is there's 60 acres here, and it has a lot of drainage problems. So this 202 right here might not reflect the whole field. We're gonna have some spots where it got completely drowned out. We're gonna have some high sand ridges in there where it might only make 100. and it's going to average probably quite a bit lower than 202. My guess would be 170, maybe 180 if we're lucky. But right here, corn's pretty good. We got a good stand once you get past the thin spot. But looking good. This corn is not as far along as the last one. This is the last one. You can see it's dented well. This was planted earlier. This is not dented. That milk line, you really can't even tell where it's at on this just because it's so far behind. So rain would really, really, really help this farm. It's got a ways to go yet. I need to learn how to close the tailgate. Next field, I switched trucks because it is really hot and the air works better in this one. So speaking of heat, one thing that's been nice is up until yesterday, it hasn't been very hot. It's only been up in the 80s, low 80s, mid 80s, which really was nice because as dry as we were, it didn't put any additional stress on this corn crop. And then starting yesterday, we've had heat index close to 100. It's not too bad right now. I wouldn't want to be working outside all day in it, but it's not too bad. This field here looks like it's holding on pretty well. It's still fairly green. It's not a real dark green color, so it tells me it's lacking something, most likely water. But we're gonna step out here, grab some ears. This field was strip till corn on corn. It also had cereal rye as a cover crop, so it'll be interesting to see if this field held up any better with that treatment versus our conventional tillage and some of our other forms of tillage, planting, whatever you want to call it. I'll take you guys out with me in this field. As you can see, we have some down corn here and there. That storm that came through blew some of our corn down here and there. Nothing real terrible, just in spots. Wow, once you get into the inside of this field, it starts looking a lot worse, which is why you can't judge a field, or I should say you can't scout a field from the road. But anyways, I guess this might just be a little pocket here. Get back into this stuff. You can't really see it now, but this field, I did a late season application of nitrogen with the sprayer with drop tubes, and I didn't have my spray pattern really right, and I burnt the crap out of the bottom leaves on the corn. You could really tell it early on. I don't think it affected it too much because it was pretty much below the ear. So like over here, that, I mean, the corn is fired, but a lot of this is from that late season application of nitrogen. Anyways, so we're out here. I'm gonna do a stand count real quick and grab some ears and see what this comes out as. All right, got my ears. I always like to do my scouting late in the day because you're always super itchy when you get done walking through a cornfield. And if I do it late in the day, I can just take a shower and feel a lot better. So that's why we're doing this late. Hello. All right, got my ears here and did calculations on them. At first glance, they look like pretty good ears, but this guy's only 14 around. His kernels are a little bigger, but I guess they are pretty decent ears. We like to see 16 around or better, so it is what it is. But what really hurt this farm is I'm only counting 29,000 population, so that's quite a bit lower than what I'd like to see. So we came up with an average yield on these three of 184, which that's pretty darn good for us. A normal corn crop for us is anywhere from 160 to 180. So if we can do 180 or better, we're usually pretty happy. So if this field turns out 180, I'll be pretty pumped, to be honest. So like I said, this field has some spots where it's got some water issues, some drainage issues, so I know we're going to have trouble with that. It's got a pretty big sand hill in the back. That's going to knock some yield off the top, but it still looks decent. this is one of the fields that out by the road it doesn't look so great, but once you get out in it, it looks a little better. So that's why I like to get out in the field and kind of see what's going on this time of the year. Once again, this corn is planted later. It's not dented yet. It still has some time. Put some test weight on, and that's it. We're gonna move on to the next field. All right, here is the last field that I'm gonna show you for this video. This field I'm a little disappointed with. It is not very good looking at all. Of course, this area of the field is all replants, and those are usually quite a bit behind our first planted stuff, but it is what it is. We're gonna go out here, do a yield check, and see what we got. I might go to a replanted spot and then an original planting spot and see what the difference is. But first, I'll show you the beans over on this side of the farm. They are really looking rough. This farm has some drainage issues. By now you're probably figuring out that that's kind of a theme on our farm, drainage issues. We farm a lot of poorly drained ground, a lot of ground that needs tile, but we're just fixing it a little bit at a time as we can. So this is a low spot. Beans kind of got flooded out. Got some nice cocklebur plants in here. I'll get back to a decent spot in the field and show you what they kind of look like. These beans are a 2-1 maturity enlist soybean. They are pretty short, which, like I said, height means nothing to soybeans. We've had short beans that yield really good. We've had tall beans that yield really bad. So height doesn't really necessarily mean anything. I prefer tall beans because they're easier to combine, but it is what it is. So these beans, you can tell, I realize, once again, facing into the sun, hard to see for you guys, but they are struggling. These top leaves are just really small, and that's kind of one of the signs that they are under stress. When they get enough moisture and the right growing environment, they will actually start growing more pods on the top, and the leaves will get big and pull that sunlight in and fill those pods out. But we haven't had the right weather. I mean, look at this crack in the ground. I can stick my whole hand down in there. They need a rain right now, and I don't think we're gonna get it. So other than that, they are potted pretty well. The nodes are closer together on this plant than the last one, so probably about the same amount of pods. They're just closer together. A lot of 2-bean pods. Don't see any 1-bean pods on this one, but we like to see 3 and 4-bean pods. I've been hearing Pro Farmer Tour, they saw a lot of 2-bean pods this year, so we will see what we get when we get in the field. All right, so I got some ears here, did the calculations. So originally I thought this was from an area that was replanted, and this was from an area that was original planting, but upon further inspection, this corn is further along, it's dented. This corn is got a few starting to dent. So now I'm starting to think that this corn was replanted and this was original planting. I did plant earlier maturity corn for replant, so maybe it outran the other one and matured faster. But anyways, this one came up with 157. This one came up with 182. So you average them together, you're in the 160s. I think that pretty accurately describes this field. It's looking pretty rough. This is a new farm, we don't have any history on it, and it's a pretty tough piece of ground. It's got a lot of wet spots on it. It's pretty heavy clay. It's kind of hard to farm. I sound like I'm complaining, but it is a tougher piece of ground to farm. Corn doesn't look the greatest, but we'll be happy with what we get off of it anyway. So that is gonna wrap up my not so pro farmer crop tour for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this kind of shed a little bit of light on how we measure yield and do yield checks. I'm sure there'll be someone who criticizes my technique for getting random ears and whatnot, but it's not accurate by any means. So I could come up with a 202 and end up with 160, by the end of it, just because I walked into a good spot in the field. So unless you can get some ears from every acre or every other acre, you're not really going to have that accurate of a yield count. It's just kind of an idea, helps you prepare for marketing and logistics and all that for harvest. So there you have it. That's what we're looking at for a crop this year. My best guess is maybe about 4 weeks we could start getting in the field. If we don't get any rain, I think that'll be pretty darn close. It's going to be a pretty early harvest, so there's no reason to start taking any real high moisture corn out. We're going to let it dry down in the field as much as we can. That way we don't have a big drying cost like we did last year. So that's what we got. Maybe 4 weeks, might be in the field. It's really been a strange growing season. Every season's different. We never end up with two that are alike. It started off really cold and we were planting corn probably when we shouldn't have been, but coming off a year like 2019, we didn't want to get behind and then end up having to plant all of our corn in June like we did last year. So we were slamming corn into the ground when we probably shouldn't have, and we ended up having to replant about 45% of our corn. So that's definitely not ideal. We're going to have wet pockets throughout the field where we patched in, and it is what it is. Hopefully it'll dry down enough. We still got those replants in earlier than the majority of our corn last year, so they should dry down pretty good and they'll mix in with the original planted corn, and hopefully it's not too terribly wet and we won't have a big drying bill. So that's that. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next one. I'm gonna go home and take a shower because now I'm all itchy. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. I told you I'd look up what the Pro Farmer numbers were. They came up with 177.5 for national corn yield average. If you average up the yield checks that I just did, it comes up to 178.2. So we are, what would that be, 7/10 of a bushel higher than Pro Farmer Tour. So we'll see what we get.